I just finished watching the latest IFL TV interview with Eddie Hearn, and he pretty much confirmed what I suspected for quite some time, which is that the fight that he's been trying to make for Anthony Joshua in September, the fight that he likes most for September, is the Dillian Whyte fight. And I always felt that would be the case because of the fact that Dillian Whyte has no promotional ties and he's not signed to any TV network. So it'll be the easiest fight to make from a promotional point of view. And I do believe that Eddie Hearn genuinely thinks that Joshua could handle Dillian Whyte with relative ease. So Hearn came out and said that's the fight he's really been trying to make for September. But unfortunately, Dillian Whyte has a hand injury, which seems to be ruling him out for September. And the Whyte fight is more likely to happen in November instead. Also, another name that people have been talking about for Joshua, obviously in September, was David Price. But that fight also seems unlikely, not because of the European heavyweight title fight that David Price was set to partake in, because David Price pulled out of that fight. But because of the fact that David Price apparently has a neck injury, he pulled out of the European title fight for the vacant title, and he was set to fight in Liverpool, his homecoming fight, in June or July against an opponent that never got named, but he's had to pull out of that as well now. And the assumption is that David Price needs a tune-up fight before facing Anthony Joshua, because he hasn't been particularly active over the past 12 months. So the assumption is he'd need a tune-up fight before facing Joshua, and with this neck injury, he won't be able to get a tune-up fight before September. Well, it's unlikely anyway, depending on the severity of the neck injury. So that's ruled Price and Dillian Whyte out from facing Anthony Joshua in September, unfortunately. Unforeseen circumstances. So the other opponents that Eddie Hearn's talking about are people like Manuel Charr, Tony Thompson, Alexander Ustinov, and Marius Vac, or Marius Wack, however you want to pronounce it. Now, Tony Thompson, according to Eddie Hearn, has also got a fight lined up for himself, so that's probably going to rule him out of facing Joshua. So you're left with the other three. I doubt that Eddie Hearn will put Joshua in with Marius Wack anytime soon. Marius Wack is a limited heavyweight, but he's incredibly tough, and he will be able to put the pressure on potentially for 12 rounds, 10 rounds. So I'm not sure Eddie Hearn's going to want to do that right away. I think Manuel Charr and Ustinov are more likely. Ustinov, even though he's big and strong, he's pretty limited. Remember, this was a guy who got stopped by Kubrat Pulev. Pulev's a contender and whatnot, but he did manage to stop Ustinov and take his unbeaten record. And Pulev not really noted as a big puncher. So I think that Eddie Hearn might look at Ustinov and say, you know what, I think Joshua could take him. He certainly fought better guys than Ustinov in the amateurs and beat him. So, yeah, that's a possibility, but I think the front runner probably has to be Manuel Charr. But I don't know whether that fight's going to happen in July, which is when Joshua is scheduled to fight next, whether that's going to happen in September, if it is indeed Manuel Charr. But drop your comments below, people. I know people are very cynical about the way Joshua's been brought along, which is something I really don't understand. I think he's been brought along very well. The issue with Joshua is he's doing better than they expected him to do. He's been giving opponents who normally take other fighters rounds, and Joshua's just blowing them away. So people are saying he's being matched too easy. What can you do? What can you do, man? Because these are guys who do take other fighters rounds. There's no question about it. Dennis Baktov normally takes people rounds. Kevin Johnson normally takes people rounds. Yeah, they weren't there to win the fight, but normally they're very, very durable fighters. Joshua's just walking straight through them. So it is what it is. He's definitely doing better than people expected. You know, you have to remember, you look at Tyson Fury on his way up. He struggled with domestic level opposition when Tyson Fury was on the way up. He went life and death with John McDermott twice. He was dropped by Nevin Pikage, a guy who had like 2 KOs in, 15 or 16 fights or something like that. Fury had a pretty rough times early on in his career, even at domestic level. And that same John McDermott was knocked out in 1 round by David Price, just to put that in perspective. Even the great Lennox Lewis on the way up, he fought a journeyman called Levi Billups. That was in about Lewis's maybe 15th fight or something like that, 14th fight. And he struggled with Billups. That was a journeyman. He struggled with Levi Billups. So people were looking at that Billups fight and they were saying, you know what, if Lewis is struggling with Billups, this guy can't possibly be a threat to Holyfield or Riddick Bowe or Tyson. And that same Levi Billups, a fight or two later, was knocked out in 1 or 2 rounds by Corey Sanders. So these things happen with prospects on the way up. They do end up having tough fights, unexpectedly tough fights against opposition who they're expected to blow away. But with Joshua, that's not the case. He's blowing away guys who are expected to give him rounds. So people should give him credit for that. Anyway, let me know how you feel about everything I've talked about in this video. Who do you think is most likely to face Joshua in July and then September? What do you think about the injuries to David Price and Dillian Whyte? Let me know how you feel in the comment section below. It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.